For weeks now, we've been faced with so much uncertainty coming from President Trump. Each day brings new tariff threats. Now, President Trump is threatening tariffs on steel and aluminum. He's pointing his finger at dairy and lumber, shifting timelines, different excuses, chaos and confusion. It's hurting workers, it's hurting businesses, it's hurting investments, and it's hurting families on both sides of the border. It needs to end. That's why I've been crystal clear. Until these tariffs are off the table, until the threat of tariffs is gone for good, Ontario will not relent. We will not back down. Pausing some tariffs, making last-minute exemptions, it won't cut it. We need to end the chaos once and for all. We need to sit down, work together, and land a fair deal. A deal that gives businesses the confidence to invest. A deal that gives workers the security they need and deserve. Until then, Ontario will keep up the fight. We will apply maximum pressure to maximize our leverage. That's why today we're moving forward with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports. For the 1.5 million American homes and businesses that Ontario powers, homes and businesses in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average, this will add around $100 per month to the bills of hardworking Americans. Let me be clear, I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely. Believe me when I say I do not want to do this. I feel terrible for the American people because it's not the American people who started this trade war. It's one person who's responsible. That's President Trump. I'd rather be working together. I want to sell the U.S. more energy, more electricity, more critical minerals. I want to make Canada and the United States the richest, most successful, safest, most secure two countries on the planet. But as Premier, my number one job is to protect the people of Ontario and in hand protect the people of Canada. I will do whatever it takes. I will fight like I've never fought before to protect Ontario. Friends, none of this makes sense. Costly tariffs against your closest friends and allies do not make sense. The U.S. markets have lost trillions in value. Companies are second-guessing investments into the American economy. American workers' jobs are at risk as we speak right now. Cost of hardworking American families will only go up. It doesn't have to be this way. We are stronger when we work together. I hope we can get back to working together, creating jobs, growing our economies, lowering costs for families in both countries. We don't get there by easing up. We will remain strong. We will be relentless. We will do whatever it takes to protect Ontario.
In addition to these new retaliatory tariffs from China, Canada's tariffs on the U.S. are still in place. Last week, it put a 25% levy on things like beer, fruit and vegetables, shoes, cosmetics, and more. And today, Ontario starts charging a 25% surcharge on electricity to 3 U.S. states, Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. The tariff war and opposition to President Trump has actually unified Canadians. Listen to these remarks from Mark Carney, who is expected to be Canada's next prime minister. He was just elected to head the Liberal Party yesterday, soon potentially to be sworn in as PM.
The Canadian government has rightly retaliated and is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada. My government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect.
Let's discuss with Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, which is the province that started to impose that surcharge on 1.5 million homes and businesses in the United States. He also ordered all U.S. alcohol to be removed from Ontario shelves. Premier, thank you so much for sharing part of the afternoon with us. What do you hope to achieve with this surcharge? What needs to happen for you to remove it?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on, Boris. And I start off every interview with telling Americans that Canadians love Americans. I love Americans. It's one person that's caused this problem, and that's President Trump. As he is putting tariffs on us, even if he says he's putting it on hold, there's still 60% of goods that are crossing the borders that will be tariffed, and it's hurting both economies. It's hurting the American economy. It's hurting the Canadian economy. Uncertainty is what people don't like hearing in general life, not to mention the markets are tumbling, and investors from around the world are looking twice at America and Canada to invest in. There's no reason for a recession. I call it the self-made Donald Trump recession. He ran on a mandate to lower prices, to make sure we didn't have inflation, to create more jobs, and it's backfired. So let's sit down at the table and let's start working on a new USMCA deal, even though President Trump said it was the greatest deal he's ever made. Nothing's changed, so I guess it's not the greatest deal now.
His argument would be that he's trying to remake the American economy to produce more goods that are currently imported into the U.S. here at home. With these electricity surcharges, you say that the move is designed to protect your province. The administration, if they see it as an escalation and they reciprocate with tariffs on lumber, steel, and dairy, ultimately, doesn't that hurt your constituents?
No, we're looking at negotiating through strength. If he cuts off the lumber or puts a tariff, do you know whose costs are going up? It's the American people that want to buy a home. They're going to pay more for their home, or steel that they need, or aluminum that is only 16% of aluminum's manufactured in the U.S. They rely on over 60% aluminum to come down there for their goods. High-grade nickel coming out of Ontario. That 50% of the high-grade nickel for your military, aerospace, and manufacturing comes from Ontario. And the list keeps going on and on and on, not to mention the 4.3 million barrels of crude oil that we ship down every single day. So I believe in building an AMCAN fortress. Let's make sure that we focus on having the two greatest countries in the world, the most prosperous, the richest, the safest. The problem's not Canada, it's China right now. And he has to keep an eye on China.
I do want to ask you about the question of fairness, and specifically on one claim, because I've heard it from Trump and a number of officials in his administration, most recently Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He argues that Canada has a 255% tariff on dairy imports. The administration has cited that over and over again. Is that number accurate? Do you think it's fair for American dairy farmers?
Well, what I'd like to do is sit down and discuss these issues with them at a USMCA table. What I will tell you this, if we take the 4.3 million barrels a day that we ship down there to keep your economy going off the balance sheet, the U.S. has a $56 billion surplus, a trade surplus with Canada. I'm okay with that. That's fine. Things were going fine. Everything was moving forward. Market was going up a little bit. Everyone was optimistic. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he wants to attack his closest neighbor and ally. And his number, I call their number one customer. You don't attack your number one customer and expect the results that he thought were going to happen. Protectionism does not work, especially between Canada and the U.S. Maybe you should take a page out of Ronald Reagan's book.
Premier, I do want to ask you about Mark Carney. He is in line to become the next prime minister. We saw Justin Trudeau's relationship with Trump evolve and then ultimately degrade. How do you think Mark Carney is going to approach President Trump?
Well, Mr. Carney is a very, very bright individual, and it's up to Mr. Carney to build that relationship with President Trump. They're both bright people. Let's make no mistake about it. Agree or disagree with President Trump. He understands finances. So does Mark Carney, and so do I. We're business people. And if we sit down around the table, we can resolve the problem and make sure that both countries prosper, like the likes of which this country's never seen, or the likes of which the U.S. has never seen, if we work together.
Premier Doug Ford, we appreciate you joining us and sharing your point of view.
Thank you so much, and God bless America and God bless Canada. Thank you so much.
Best friends for never?
The Americans want our resources, our water, our land, our country. Think about it. If they succeeded, they would destroy our way of life. We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't ask for this fight. But Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. So the Americans, they should make no mistake, in trade as in hockey, Canada will win.
That was Mark Carney, the soon-to-be Canadian Prime Minister. And what you just saw and listened to is the latest example of how a once unbreakable bond between the U.S. and Canada has fractured as President Trump advances his trade war against both Canada and Mexico. Tariffs on Canada are expected to go into effect on April 2nd. My panel is back now. Nia, you know, Canada has it in him. Let's see how he takes it.
Yeah,
as he takes over.
I think that's right. I mean, you saw over the last many weeks Donald Trump talking about Canada as the 51st state, talking about Trudeau as Governor Trudeau. That's become sort of his moniker. And now this is a new person. What's been interesting is that Trump has brought Trudeau's party back to life, right? There was this really sort of resurgent interest in a more conservative party, and now you have in this person somebody who's really benefiting from this fight with Donald Trump. Who knew that America would want to be at war with the Canadians? But apparently it's based on a South Park movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so bring us up to speed on that. And if the South Park guys are listening, please come on anytime and,
that was the
and
premise
talk
of
about
that
it.
movie. Was it
Yeah.
I mean, going to war with Canada, and that's essentially, you know, what's interesting is how the rhetoric also from the new incoming Canadian Prime Minister, much different than what we're seeing from, you know, our Mexican partners, Claudia Sheinbaum, the way she has approached Donald Trump, which is
true.
A little bit, you know, obviously what we've seen other leaders do, try to softer rhetoric, if you will. This is, we're going right at him. But Nia's absolutely right. The domestic politics in Canada are absolutely fascinating. It has led to this nationalistic fervor within Canada that has boosted the Trudeau's party and potentially could ultimately undercut what Donald Trump wants to achieve here. But if he's talking tough, the new incoming leader, on Donald Trump, I doubt Donald Trump is going to back off. He wants people to talk nicely to him for him to back off, but the rhetoric will only be ratcheted up.
Inside Canadian politics. I love
Yes.
it. Let's look a little bit at the U.S.-Canada alliance, the economic alliance. And the bilateral trade is about $2.5 billion in goods and services a day. 400,000 people cross between countries every day. The U.S. has maintained the official presence in Canada since 1833. And I didn't actually realize this, that they share the world's longest undefended border.
Yeah, and it's the bottom line there is that there is a lot of opportunity for Canada to channel this nationalistic fervor into making Americans feel real political pain. I mean, there's no corresponding anti-Canada faction in the U.S. that also wants to get the bit in their teeth and really go sock it to those guys, right? By and large, U.S. consumers just want to see lower prices, a strong economy, and now that we are kind of creating with our own political moves, this new guerrilla faction that's just determined to stop that from happening for our people in order to try to shake loose some kind of change at the top level. The other weird thing about it is just the fact that, like you say, Canada and Mexico are pursuing such different strategies, and you can see Trump react to those in real time, right? Where he is sort of showering praise on Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, meanwhile getting angrier and angrier at Canadian leadership. While supposedly the pretext for all these things is drugs coming over the borders and things like that. So as you say, it's definitely a risky strategy if the goal is to get Trump to back off.
So on that note, now is it's time for our truth sandwich portion of the lunch hour, if you will. And we're going to start by referring to what Nia was talking about earlier, and that is the whole question of fentanyl, and whether or not that is one of the really big problems coming from Canada. It is a very big problem in the U.S., but not from Canada. Let's, though, listen to what some of the Republicans, including in the president's administration are claiming.
We launched a drug war, not a trade war, and it was part of a negotiation to get Canada and Mexico to stop shipping fentanyl across our borders.
You're saying this really is about fentanyl?
It really is about fentanyl. It really is. And I think the president obviously wants a strong economy, obviously wants better trade deals as well. But this is about fentanyl.
Now, again, it is a problem in the United States. It is a problem when it comes to the southern border of the United States, where it's coming in much more from Mexico. But when it comes to Canada, check this out. So the total pounds seized of fentanyl, almost 22,000 pounds. The northern border, 43 pounds. So it's less than 1% of the very dangerous and scary fentanyl problem. And that's the reality.
Yeah, and the thing is, you have seen Canada make some moves around this. Again, they're barely part of the problem. It is a big problem. Mexico is a really big part of the problem. And they, too, Claudia Sheinbaum, even before Trump was in office, wanted to go aggressively at some of these drug cartels. She's doing that. You saw them cooperate in trying to have some of these drug warlords prosecuted. So there is something happening with this. The question, I think, for Trump is, will it be enough, or are there just going to be sort of shifting explanations for why these tariffs are happening or aren't happening?
I mean, they could say it's a drug war, not a trade war, all they want, but it is a trade war.
Yeah, it is.
People will feel it. And, I'll be interested in, from my perch, watching how some of those members from northern states in Maine, the Senator Susan Collins is very concerned about the impacts on tariffs impacting the Maine economy. Wisconsin House members are concerned about the impact on the agriculture.
Even Ron Johnson.
Ron Johnson is concerned. Chuck Grassley from the Iowa members and how it will impact their farmers. So this is, yes, they could say drug war. That could be their argument to try to ease concerns, but people start feeling it, and that's going to change the dynamic.
And it's important to note, too, that one of the reasons that Canada is so upset and aggrieved over this whole thing is that even though they were a small part of the problem last year, they had already also taken significant steps to try to show Donald Trump they were doing more to police the small bit of fentanyl that was coming over their border. I mean, CBP data for January had a fraction of a single pound of fentanyl seized. I think I saw the size of a AAA battery was the amount of fentanyl that was seized at that border in January. And then on the back of that, Trump ratchets up the trade war. So they're like, what do you want us to do? What's the standard you want us to meet?
Well, Canada's Liberal Party has picked Mark Carney to be the party leader and Canada's next prime minister. Carney, a former central banker, got the backing of 85% of his party. And he says in government, he'll keep the interests of Canadians front and center.
I pledge to you and to all Canadians that I will follow their example. I will work day and night with one purpose, which is to build a stronger Canada for everyone.
Carney's expected to be sworn in the coming days. His most urgent task will be managing Canada's increasingly fraught relationship with the Trump White House. On Sunday, the outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had this warning about relations with the United States.
As Canadians face from our neighbor an existential challenge, an economic crisis, Canadians are showing exactly what we are made of.
That comment said in reference to the U.S. president's tariff threats and his calls to make Canada the 51st state of the United States. Martina Esteves-Skrednev, Canada's bureau chief at the New York Times, joins us live now from Ottawa. Martina, thank you so much for being with us. Let's talk about Mark Carney. I mean, this is a very, very accomplished individual. We're talking Harvard-educated, Oxford-educated, former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, the only non-British person to have that role, by the way. He led Canada and steered Canada through the 2008 financial crisis as well. So clearly, when it comes to having economic chops, I mean, he is the man. But given what's happening with the United States right now, you really need somebody who is a talented politician. You think about how the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, has handled Donald Trump. I mean, it's been a mix of sort of being strong and firm and standing her own ground, while at the same time allowing for a diplomatic off-ramp. That seems to be the language that Donald Trump understands. How will Mark Carney, I mean, obviously he understands how to deal with this economically in terms of retaliatory tariffs. Does he have what it takes at this point, given that he has no experience in terms of elected office? Does he have what it takes to handle this diplomatically and politically?
I think it's really the most important question. And, you know, as central bank governor, Mark Carney has held public office, as you mentioned, during major meltdowns, also during Brexit when he was Bank of England governor. Those are actually political jobs. They're just not overtly political in the elected sense that we're used to. And the reality is, even though he's been in the public eye for so many years, really throughout his career, we don't know that much about him. What we do know is that he's been in the room when very difficult conversations have been held in those previous roles. His challenge really right now is not just that he needs to reboot the relationship with Donald Trump. We know that Donald Trump did not get along with Justin Trudeau, and perhaps that influenced part of the predicament the relationship is in right now. But he's also going to have to call a federal election very soon. That means he's going to have to lean into that aggressive anti-Trump, anti-US rhetoric. That's what Canada wants right now. That's what voters are looking for. But that may not play very well when he is in the room or he's on the phone with President Trump.
Exactly.
And he is promising to go toe to toe. He said that he would be prepared for a dollar for dollar retaliatory tariff. Also said he's prepared to the U.S.-Canadian exports to be tariffed as well. And Canada is the largest supplier of energy to the United States, we should note. It's interesting, the Donald Trump effect, because as accomplished as Mark Carney is, I don't know how familiar he was to every Canadian prior to the last few months. And now here you have a Liberal Party that's neck and neck with the Conservative Party, and in terms of playing to his advantage, when do you expect to see a general election called? It has to be called by October, but given how close these two parties are now in polling, do you think it will happen much sooner?
It has to happen sooner, in fact. Mark Carney does not hold a seat in Parliament. He will be sworn in as Prime Minister, but he needs to call a federal election as soon as possible. His party, the Liberals, do not command a majority in the House of Commons here in Parliament. That means that what we understand from his team, what he said to people already, our reporting shows that he will be calling a federal election. So my bets, I'm not a betting woman, is that we will have an election in the course of May. And that will mean that we are entering a very intense campaigning period. He's going to have to carry on with that energy he's built up over the last 2 months trying to secure his party's vote. But the new audience will not be the party faithful who rallied around him in such a dramatic way last night here in Ottawa. It will be the entire population who are fatigued after 10 years of Trudeau, are terrified and angry with the Trump threat. And so they'll be looking to him for real answers, and there'll be more scrutiny on him.
How seriously are Canadians taking Donald Trump's threat to make Canada the 51st state? I mean, based on what I'm seeing in terms of, comments from Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, they are taking it extremely serious. I mean, Donald Trump went so far as referring to Justin Trudeau as governor many, many times. Take us through that.
Sure. And, I should say they're taking it deadly seriously. And they have some reason for that. Last week, we had an exclusive report in the New York Times. My sources, 4 individuals directly familiar with communications between the president and Prime Minister Trudeau, who said that in an early February phone call between the two men, President Trump, while raising trade concerns and irritants in their relationship that we know he's upset about, also raised the 1908 border treaty between the two countries and called that into question. He also raised questions about how the two countries manage their shared water resources. These are pretty existential things for Canadians. And so they're taking it very seriously. The government is taking it seriously. The opposition Conservative Party is taking it seriously, which I think speaks to just the gravity of the moment. It's not a joke, and it goes well beyond the trolling online.
Right, Martina Stevas-Gardiner, thank you so much. We appreciate it.